growth. And I think in the time, I will skip the 3 fallacies of credit in detail, but generally speaking, it's always the views of governments that if it's the case that a country is in trouble, if you lend it more money, it'll grow its way out of that trouble. If you don't lend it money, it'll never pay you back. And so Germany lends to the periphery and the like, but the problem is that it's a way out of the money option. You have to think about that. The second problem is that individuals are entitled to a better life. I agree with that. But if you have unfunded liabilities, then it's the case that it's not necessarily the case that the country will recover, and that it's not necessarily the case that continuing to extend benefits you can't afford to pay, as in France, for example, then it causes unintended consequences. Young people don't have kids. Why should they? Because why should their kids pay for the debt that the country has? And 2 is they can't afford it because the premiums are higher. So the populations of Italy, the populations of Spain, the populations of France are not reproducing themselves. That's just economics. And also as a result of the stagnation that occurs because of these policies, you don't achieve growth, and the best of your young people leave the country. Spain has 57% of the young people are unemployed at this particular moment. So they'll leave, and I talked to my Spanish friends, said they'll come back when there's jobs. I said, well, okay. I don't necessarily believe that's the correct model. And so the third is that it's claimed that prosperity is exports. If you can export, that's terrific. So Germany, exporting to the periphery, it's claimed that if Germany were to leave the euro, which maybe it should, the Deutschmark, its currency, would increase in value to such an extent that its exports would fall. But let me ask you a question. If I export to you, Germany exports to other countries in Europe, which is about 65% of its export business, and Germany lends, or German banks lend these countries money to buy the goods and services you're producing, and Spain or Italy never have any intention of paying you back. What's the value of exporting? If you want to sell me goods and services on credit, great. So anyway, that's the problem. If we look at just debt is everywhere. I mean, we've had a debt world. Over time, promises, promises, promises. And the debt has increased dramatically. This is under the Rogoff-Reinhardt model, this is 90% level. It's supposedly a critical point to worry about in terms of defaults. But in the past, the only way you can get out of debt problems is inflation. That's it. You have to inflate your way out. That's and restructure things. So we all worry about inflation and just unintended, unexpected, huge inflation as people say, no more. I'm going to go and protect myself, and makes it tougher. So if we look at the United States, our GDP, even though our budget at current moment is only $600 million in arrears, down from $1 trillion over the last years, I think it's really temporary, because if you look at the projected growth rates in the United States debt, and we don't do anything in our country, they become larger and larger, so that debt to GDP can end up at 150% of our gross domestic product going forward. And our unfunded liabilities in present value, unless technology or economics are used to reduce them, are gigantic. We have our publicly held debt is about $9.7 trillion. Our deficit in our Social Security program is $9.3 trillion. That's what we promised people in terms of Social Security. And in Medicare, our health care benefits were $24 trillion in the whole under current projections, without new technology or incentives for people to control these costs or changes in the programs. And so I love it. I mean, I'm an old guy, and it means $24 trillion. That means I'm getting a real bargain on my medical stuff, right? And I'm getting these nice Social Security checks, but that means my kids are not happy. They come and tell me, Dad, why are you getting all these medical benefits? I got to pay this in the future. So we could have a war between me, the old, and my kids, the young. And this is a very interesting question for society. And this is the balance that we have between money being moved from education to pay for the old, money being moved from job creation, money being moved from infrastructure in our societies to really support those things that we need for our growth going forward. And the state and local pension funds are in bad shape because they're smaller, and we have anywhere from $2 trillion deficit in our Illinois is broke. You know, theoretically, California, where I live, I worry about because we have all these promises, and the accounting is so bad that you don't even know really what the values are. And the only hope for all this is that we create incentives so people control their own expenditures to extent, and that we have medical technology, which allows us to actually improve this. But these are numbers that you say. So the debt overhang of the governments is quite large, and in addition to that of the people. So I think that the consumption-based recovery will be unlikely. We need income to consume. If we don't reduce savings, we don't have any savings as we get older. And so there's a huge imbalance in the labor force. Too many old people and fewer young people. And young people take risks. Young people are innovators. You know, they're willing to take the risks. If we only employ old people, you know, we're conservative. We don't take the risks anymore. And even if you have an older population working longer, that's not necessarily good for innovation and creativity. I know my students at Stanford, you know, they're taking a course and they're out there trying to have a new high-tech company or new something they're working on. And they tell me about their project, and I listen to it, and I say, okay, do it. And if you're right, send me a check. So and it's hard for governments to come to agreement with growth. So I said government things will impede